Ethan had been a soldier for most of his life. He was used to dangerous missions, intense battles, and saving those who needed help. But nothing could prepare him for the day he found her. It started like any other mission. Ethan and his team had been sent to a distant planet in the galaxy to help a stranded diplomat. The mission seemed simple enough: rescue the diplomat and bring them back to safety. But when they landed, things took a strange turn. They were told that the diplomat had been taken to a remote underground facility by the alien empire controlling the planet. Ethan and his team made their way to the facility, cautiously walking through the dark, metal hallways. The air smelled of dust and rust. The lights flickered overhead, casting long shadows on the walls. As they moved deeper into the facility, they heard strange sounds in the distance: whispers and the clinking of chains. "Stay alert," Ethan said, his voice low and steady. The others nodded in agreement. After a while, they reached a large room at the back of the facility. The walls were covered with strange symbols, and in the center of the room, there was a heavy metal chair, chained to the floor, and sitting in that chair was an alien. Ethan stopped dead in his tracks. The alien was unlike anything he had ever seen. She had a tall, graceful figure, her skin shimmering with a faint blue glow. Her eyes were large and golden, reflecting the light like to burning orbs. Her long silver hair was tangled, and her body was covered in chains that wrapped around her arms and legs, holding her to the chair. Who are you?" Ethan whispered, stepping forward. The alien lifted her head, her eyes meeting his for the first time. There was a flicker of recognition in her gaze, but it quickly turned into suspicion. "I'm Lyra," she said, her voice soft but filled with pain, "and you should leave before they come." Ethan didn't understand what she meant at first. "Who's going to come?" he asked, but before she could answer, the sound of heavy footsteps echoed down the hall. The soldiers from the alien empire were coming. "Quick, we need to get her out of here," one of Ethan's teammates shouted. Ethan was torn. They had come for the diplomat, not an alien prisoner. But the sight of Lyra, chained and hurt, tugged at something deep inside him. She wasn't just a prisoner, she was a person. He could see the fear in her eyes, the desperation to be free. "How did you end up here?" Ethan asked her, still keeping his voice calm. Lyra looked down at her chains, then back up at him. "I was captured when my people were defeated in battle. They've kept me here as a trophy, as a reminder of their power." She paused, her voice trembling. "I am their reward for winning. But I don't want this." Ethan felt his chest tighten. He couldn't leave her behind. He had been trained to save lives, not to walk away from someone who needed help. The footsteps grew louder. Without thinking, Ethan rushed to her side. "I'm getting you out of here." Lyra's eyes widened in surprise. "You can't. They'll kill you." "I'm not leaving you here," Ethan said firmly, his hand reaching out to her chains. "We'll fight together if we have to." He pulled a small device from his belt and began to cut through the chains, holding Lyra down as the chains fell away. Lyra stood shakily, her legs weak from being bound for so long. "You're free," Ethan said, his voice full of determination. "But we need to move fast." Lyra looked at him for a moment, disbelief written on her face. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. "Because it's the right thing to do," Ethan replied simply. Just as the last of the chains fell to the floor, the door to the room burst open. Two armed soldiers stood in the doorway, their weapons drawn. "Freeze," one of them shouted. Ethan quickly reached for his weapon, but Lyra was faster, with a surprising amount of strength. She leaped toward the soldiers, knocking one of them to the ground. The other fired his weapon, but Lyra grabbed the blast midair and redirected it, causing the soldier to fall back. Stunned, Ethan was shocked. You're amazing." Lyra gave him a small, grateful smile. "I had no choice but to survive." The two of them ran out of the room and into the hallway. Ethan looked around, trying to figure out their escape route. The sound of alarms blared, echoing through the facility. "Where do we go?" Ethan asked. Lyra didn't hesitate. "Follow me," she said, her voice steady. She led him through a series of dark hallways, twisting and turning. They could hear the soldiers chasing after them, but Lyra seemed to know exactly where to go. Soon, They reached a small elevator that would take them to the surface. As they stepped inside, Ethan couldn't help but feel a sense of urgency. He had just freed this alien, a creature he knew almost nothing about, and yet he knew he couldn't leave her behind. The journey ahead would be dangerous, but in that moment, he made a choice. He was going to protect Lyra, no matter the cost. The elevator hummed quietly as it ascended through the dark, narrow shafts of the underground facility. Ethan and Lyra stood side by side, their eyes scanning the hallway below them. The only sound was the soft whir of the elevator's machinery and the pounding of their own hearts. Ethan had been in tight situations before, but none like this. He had always followed orders: rescue the diplomat, complete the mission, return home. It was always simple, always black and white. But this was different. Lyra wasn't just a mission. She was a person with her own past, her own fears, and now she was relying on him. "Are you sure this is the right way?" Ethan asked, his voice barely above a whisper. He wasn't used to having to depend on someone else, especially not an alien he had only just met. Lyra, still adjusting to her newfound freedom, glanced over at him. "Yes, I know the path out. I've been watching them for months." Ethan nodded, but something still gnawed at the back of his mind. He had freed Lyra from her chains, yes, but was it the right thing to do? What would happen to his team, his mission, if the alien empire came after them? He didn't know if the price of helping Lyra was too high. As the elevator stopped with a soft jolt, the doors opened to the surface, revealing a wide, desolate landscape. The sky above was a dull shade of purple, and the winds kicked up sand from the barren ground. The air smelled harsh, and the temperature was uncomfortably cold. Lyra stepped out first, her long, silver hair blowing in the wind. She looked around, her sharp eyes scanning for any signs of danger. Ethan followed, his hand instinctively resting on the weapon at his side. They weren't safe yet. "We need to move quickly," Lyra said, her voice urgent. "The Empire will be here soon." Ethan took a deep breath. He had no idea what he was getting into, but he knew one thing for sure. He couldn't turn back now. Not after what he had done. Not after what Lyra had been through. As they made their way across the rocky terrain, Lyra told Ethan more about her life. She spoke of her people, an ancient, proud race with remarkable abilities, but ones who had been brought to their knees by the ruthless empire. She was one of their most revered leaders, a symbol of hope for her people. But now, she was a prisoner, chained and forced to live in silence. "Why did they choose you?" Ethan asked, his curiosity getting the better of him. Lyra's eyes clouded over with sadness. "Because I was the strongest, the one they thought could break my people's spirit. They knew if they could break me, they could break everyone else." Ethan clenched his fist at his sides. The thought of anyone being treated that way made his blood boil. But he didn't show it. Instead, he kept his voice calm and steady. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. Lyra gave him a small, sad smile. "It's not your fault, but it's not just the chains that broke me. It's what they did to my people. We were never meant to be slaves. We were meant to be free. And now I don't know what to do. I don't know where I belong." Ethan didn't have an answer for her. He had never felt the weight of being trapped in someone else's war. He had never known what it was like to lose everything and be forced to fight for your freedom. "Where do you want it to go?" Ethan asked. "Do you have a place to hide?" Lyra shook her head. I don't know, but I will find somewhere. I have to. If I don't, they will come for me, and they will use me to make others suffer." The thought of Lyra running, hiding, always looking over her shoulder, made Ethan's heart ache. She deserved so much more than that. She deserved peace, a life free from fear. He had to find a way to help her. "You're not alone anymore," he said firmly. "I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere." Lyra turned to him, her eyes softening slightly. She had never had anyone say those words to her before. She had been alone for so long, even when surrounded by people. But Ethan, he wasn't like the others. She could feel it. For a brief moment, their eyes locked, and there was an unspoken understanding between them, a connection, a promise. Ethan didn't fully understand what it meant yet, but he knew he would do anything to protect her. Suddenly, the ground beneath their feet shook. A low rumble echoed through the air. The distant sound of engines roared to life in Lyra's head. Snapped up in alarm. "They're coming," she whispered, her voice filled with dread. Ethan's heart raced. The Empire was already on their trail. They didn't have much time. "We need to go, now," he said urgently, grabbing her arm. But Lyra pulled away, her face hardening with resolve. "No, I won't run anymore. I'll fight. I have to." Ethan hesitated. He understood her desire to fight. But they were outnumbered and outgunned. It was too dangerous. But before he could say anything, Lyra sprinted toward the rocks in the distance, her move. And swift and determined, without thinking, Ethan followed her, his legs moving faster than his mind. They had no plan, no strategy, just the will to survive. As they reached the rocks, Ethan glanced back. The sky was darkening, and the first signs of the Empire's ships appeared on the horizon. They were closing in. "This is it," he muttered, barely able to catch his breath. No turning back now. Lyra looked at him, her expression unreadable. "There's no turning back for me, either." And for the first time since meeting her, Ethan understood. He wasn't just saving her. He was fighting for something bigger, something worth fighting for. Ethan and Lyra crouched behind a large boulder, their eyes scanning the horizon. The distant sound of engines grew louder, and they could see the faint outline of ships in the sky. The Empire was closing in fast. "How long do we have?" Ethan whispered, his hand gripping the rifle at his side. Lyra's sharp eyes narrowed as she focused on the ships. "Not long. They'll land within the hour. If we don't move now, we're dead." Ethan's heart raced. They had been running for hours, barely stopping to rest, but it didn't matter. The Empire's soldiers were relentless. They had already destroyed one of Ethan's communications devices, leaving them without contact with the rest of his team. They were alone. "We need to find shelter, somewhere they can't track us," Ethan said. He scanned the rocky terrain, looking for a place to hide. Lyra nodded. "I know a cave. It's a few miles away, but it should be safe." Without another word, they set off again, moving quickly through the rocky landscape. The wind howled around them, kicking up sand and dust, but they pushed forward, determined to find cover before the Empire's forces arrived. As they ran, Ethan couldn't help but feel a sense of dread. They had no idea what the Empire would do once they caught up with them. Would they take Lyra back in chains? Would they punish her for escaping? The thought made Ethan's stomach turn. He had already made the choice to protect her, but he wasn't sure what the consequences would be. "Do you trust me?" Lyra asked, breaking his thoughts. Ethan looked over at her, surprised by the question. "What do you mean? Do you trust that I know where I'm going?" She clarified. Ethan nodded without hesitation. "I trust you. I wouldn't be here if I didn't." Lyra smiled, a small, fleeting expression that made her seem more human. "Good," she said softly, "because we'll need each other to get through this." They continued running, their pace steady but tiring. Ethan's legs were beginning to ache, and his breathing came in ragged bursts. But they couldn't afford to slow down. Not now. As they neared the cave Lyra had mentioned, the sound of the Empire's ships grew louder. Ethan could see the shadows of their sleek, deadly craft moving across the sky. He knew they couldn't outrun them for long. "We have to hurry," Ethan said, his voice tight with urgency. "They'll be on us in minutes." Lyra pushed herself harder, her silver hair trailing behind her like a comet's tail. She seemed to be drawing on some deep well of strength that Ethan didn't understand. Despite everything she had been through, she was still fighting, still pushing forward. The cave came into view, and Lyra quickened her pace, leading the way. They reached the entrance just as the first of the Empire's ships landed in the distance. Ethan's heart pounded in his chest as they ducked inside. The cave was small and dark, but it offered shelter from the pursuit. They took a moment to catch their breath, the silence around them deafening after the chaos of running. Ethan leaned against the cave wall, wiping the sweat from his brow. "How long do you think we can stay here?" he asked, his voice strained. Lyra sat down on a large rock, her eyes scanning the cave entrance. I don't know, but we have to be smart. They'll search every inch of this planet, and they'll stop at nothing to find me. Ethan sat beside her, feeling the weight of the situation settle over him. He had never been in a position like this before. In the military, he had always known what to expect. There were plans, orders to follow, and clear goals. But now, there were no orders, no backup, just him and Lyra, facing an entire empire. We'll make it out of here, Ethan said, trying to sound more confident than he felt. We just need a plan. Lyra glanced over at him, her golden eyes gleaming in the dim light of the cave. And what's your plan? She asked, a faint smirk tugging at the corner of her lips. Ethan hesitated, not having an answer. He had no idea what their next move was. All he knew was that they couldn't stay hidden forever. The Empire was too powerful, too organized. If they stayed in the cave for too long, they would be found. But as he looked at Lyra, he realized something. He wasn't doing this for a mission. He wasn't doing this because it was his job. He was doing this because, for the first time in his life, he cared about something bigger than himself. He cared about her. I don't have a perfect plan, Ethan admitted, but I do know one thing. I won't leave you behind. I'll fight for you. Lyra's expression softened, and for the first time, he saw a flicker of hope in her eyes. Thank you, she said quietly. I don't know why you're helping me, but I'm grateful. Ethan nodded. It's what I do. I protect those who can't protect themselves. There was a long pause, the only sound the distant hum of the Empire's ships. Ethan knew they didn't have much time, but for a moment, it felt like they were safe. It felt like they were on the edge of something new, something they hadn't expected, a bond forged in the heat of danger. Do you think we can win? Ethan asked, breaking the silence. Lyra's eyes turned toward the cave entrance, her gaze hardening. I don't know, but I know we'll fight. And with that, they sat in silence, listening to the growing noise outside. The Empire was coming, for them, but they were ready to face whatever came next together. The cave was cold, the air thick with tension. Ethan and Lyra had barely spoken since they hid inside, each lost in their thoughts. The only sounds were the distant hum of the Empire's ships, and the occasional rustle of the wind outside. Ethan couldn't stop thinking about their situation. It felt like they were trapped in an endless loop, always running, always hiding. He was used to fighting battles, but this was different. This wasn't just a mission, it was personal. His eyes glanced over at Lyra. She was sitting on a flat rock, her head tilted back, staring at the ceiling of the cave. Despite the fear they were facing, she looked calm, almost distant. It was as if her mind had wandered far away, to a place he couldn't reach. Lyra, Ethan said quietly. Breaking the silence, she turned her head, her golden eyes meeting his. Her expression was unreadable, but there was something there, a flicker of uncertainty. Are you all right? Ethan asked, sitting beside her. He could see the exhaustion in her face. The long hours of running, hiding, and constant fear were starting to take a toll on her. Lyra hesitated for a moment, then sighed deeply. I don't know, she replied softly. I've spent so many years running and hiding. I thought that if I could just escape, I would be free. But now, I don't know where to go. I don't know what to do with myself. Ethan's heart went out to her. He had seen soldiers go through similar struggles, the feeling of being lost after a fight was over. But Lyra's struggle was different. She wasn't just a soldier, she was a leader, a symbol of hope for her people. And now she was alone, running from a powerful empire that wanted to control her, break her, use her. You're not alone, Ethan said, his voice firm. I'm here. I'm not leaving you. Lyra's eyes softened, but doubt still lingered in her gaze. You don't understand, Ethan. I'm not just running from them. I'm running from myself. I've spent so long in chains, trapped in a life I didn't choose. And now I don't know who I am anymore. Ethan frowned, feeling the weight of her words. He had never been in her shoes, never had to carry the burden she did. But he knew one thing for sure, she didn't deserve to carry it alone. I can't pretend to understand what you've been through, Ethan said slowly, but I do know this. You're stronger than you think. You survived all this time. Even when they tried to break you. That's not weakness, that's strength. Lyra turned her eyes away from him, looking out at the darkened cave entrance. Maybe, but I don't feel strong. I feel lost. Ethan sat in silence, unsure of how to help her. There was so much pain in her words, so much fear. But there was something else, too. Something he hadn't fully realized until now. Lyra wasn't just scared of the Empire. She was scared of herself, of the things she had become in her fight for survival. I don't know what the future holds, Ethan said finally. But I do know this. You don't have to face it alone. I'll stand by you, no matter what. We'll figure this out together. Lyra's eyes flickered with something, maybe hope, maybe doubt, but she didn't speak. Instead, she turned back to him, her gaze searching his face, as if looking for something she had lost. After a long pause, she nodded. I don't know if I can be who you want me to be, she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. But I'll try. For you. Ethan's heart ached at her words. She didn't know how much those words meant to him. They didn't just speak of trust. They spoke of a bond that had been formed through their shared struggle, their shared fight for survival. And in that moment, he knew that he would never turn his back on her. No matter the cost. You don't have to be anyone other than who you are, Ethan said gently. I'm not asking you to change. I'm just asking you to trust me. Lyra's face softened, the hardness in her eyes beginning to fade. She didn't smile, but there was a small, quiet peace about her. For the first time in a long while, she felt a sense of calm. We don't have time to sit around and feel sorry for ourselves, Lyra said, her voice growing more determined. We have to keep moving. The Empire won't stop hunting us. Ethan nodded. We'll keep moving, but we'll also fight together. And with that, they stood up, ready to face the danger that was closing in. They still had a long way to go, and there were many battles ahead. But for the first time, Lyra wasn't facing it alone, and Ethan knew that no matter what came next, they would face it together. As they prepared to leave the cave, Ethan couldn't help but feel a sense of hope. They didn't have all the answers. They didn't know what tomorrow would bring. But for the first time in his life, he felt like he was on the right path, not as a soldier, but as someone who was fighting for something much bigger than himself. Lyra was more than just a prisoner, more than just a leader. She was someone he had come to care for deeply, and no matter what the future held, he would never stop fighting for her. The cave was no longer safe. Ethan could feel the tension building between the walls, as if even the earth itself was holding its breath. The hum of the Empire's ships, growing louder by the hour, made it clear that their hiding place wouldn't stay hidden for long. The Empire's forces were relentless, and every moment they spent waiting felt like one more step closer to being caught. Ethan stood by the cave entrance, his hand gripping his weapon tightly. He didn't know what he was expecting, but it felt as if the world was closing in on him, forcing him to make decisions he wasn't ready for. Lyra was sitting in the back of the cave, her eyes distant. She hadn't spoken much since their last conversation. Ethan could sense that the weight of the situation was pressing down on her. She wasn't just scared of being recaptured. She was scared of the unknown. The years of her life spent in chains, now torn between a future of freedom and the fear of what might happen next. I need to tell you something, Lyra said quietly, breaking the silence. She stood up slowly, her voice low and calm, but there was an unmistakable urgency in her tone. Ethan turned to face her. What's wrong? Lyra's golden eyes met his, her gaze steady. I've been thinking. We can't keep running forever. If we stay here much longer, we'll be trapped. The Empire is too powerful. They'll destroy everything to get to me. Ethan frowned, feeling the familiar rush of panic rising in his chest. What are you saying? We're not giving up. We're not going to let them. I'm not saying we give up, Lyra interrupted, her voice stronger now. But I need to do something. We can't just wait for them to find us. We have to take the fight to them. Ethan's eyes widened. What do you mean? Lyra took a deep breath. There's a hidden base of weapons facility not far from here. It belongs to the Empire. If we destroy it, we might slow them down, at least for a while. It'll give us time. Ethan's heart skipped a beat. Destroying an Empire facility was a huge risk. They didn't have the resources, the numbers, or the firepower to take on the Empire head-on. But he also knew that doing nothing would mean certain capture. They needed a plan, and this might be their only chance. "I'll go with you," Ethan said, his voice steady. He had already made up his mind. Whatever the plan was, he would stick by Lyra. "But we'll need to be careful. This won't be easy." Lyra nodded. "I know, but I can't just hide anymore. I've been hiding for too long. It's time to fight back." The decision was made. But as they gathered their things and prepared to leave the cave, Ethan felt a heavy weight on his chest. This wasn't just about survival anymore. This was about taking a stand, not just for Lyra, but for all the lives that had been ruined by the Empire. He was about to make a sacrifice, one that might change everything. The journey to the facility was long and treacherous. The terrain was unforgiving, with sharp rocks and narrow paths that made it difficult to move quickly. The Empire's ships were still patrolling the skies, their engines humming like a constant reminder that danger was never far behind. Ethan and Lyra moved cautiously, staying close to the shadows and avoiding the open areas where they might be spotted. They communicated in low whispers, making sure to keep their voices down. Their time was running out. When they reached the base, Ethan's heart was pounding in his chest. The facility was a massive structure, built into the side of a mountain. The walls were made of thick metal, and guards stood at regular intervals, their weapons ready. This was no small operation. It was a stronghold, a key part of the Empire's power. "We need to disable the security systems first," Lyra said. "Once we do that, we can plant the charges. But we'll have to be quick." Ethan nodded. He had no idea how they were going to get past the guards, but he trusted Lyra. She knew this place better than he did. And as they slipped inside, his focus was entirely on getting to the control room. They crept through the facility, carefully avoiding the guards and using the shadows to their advantage. Every step felt like a risk, every corner a potential trap. But they had come this far, and there was no turning back. When they finally reached the control room, Ethan's heart was racing. Lyra quickly set to work, hacking into the system. Her fingers moved quickly across the console. Her mind focused. Ethan kept watch, his eyes darting back and forth, listening for any sound of movement. "This is it," Lyra muttered. "Once the security's down, we can plant the explosives and get out." But just as she finished typing in the last command, the door to the control room burst open. A guard had spotted them. Ethan's pulse shot up as the guard raised his weapon, shouting for backup. Without thinking, Ethan lunged forward, knocking the guard to the ground. The two struggled for a moment, but Ethan managed to overpower him, knocking the weapon out of the guard's hand. Lyra grabbed the gun, turning to Ethan with wide eyes. "We have to go now." But it was too late. More guards were rushing toward them, and the alarms began to blare, signaling the breach. "Go," Lyra shouted, shoving Ethan toward the exit, with no time to waste. They raced toward the back of the facility. The noise of the alarms and footsteps behind them only pushed them faster. They had no time to plant the explosives. There was only one thing left to do. Ethan made a split-second decision. "I'll hold them off. You go." Lyra's eyes widened in shock. "No, Ethan, we're in this together." But Ethan was already moving, grabbing a grenade from his belt and tossing it toward the guards as they closed in. The explosion shook the ground, and the facility went dark. The blast had given them a few precious moments. "Run," Ethan shouted. Lyra hesitated, but only for a moment. She grabbed his hand and pulled him forward. Together, they raced into the dark, running as fast as they could, knowing they had just made the most dangerous decision of their lives. The explosion echoed in the distance, shaking the very ground beneath their feet. The dark sky was filled with the noise of the Empire's ships, their engines roaring like a thunderstorm. Ethan's heart pounded in his chest as he and Lyra ran, their footsteps quick and heavy on the rocky ground. They could hear the sounds of sirens blaring from the facility, signaling that the alarm had been triggered. The Empire was on full alert now. "We need to get to the forest," Lyra said breathlessly. her voice filled with urgency. "The trees will hide us. They won't be able to see us from the air." Ethan nodded, his mind racing. They had just triggered an explosion in one of the Empire's main facilities, and now every soldier within miles would be hunting for them. They couldn't stop, not for a second. But the landscape ahead was rocky and barren, with little cover from the sky. The forest was their only hope. They pushed themselves harder, their legs burning as they climbed over rocks and dodged the occasional patrol. Ethan could hear the roar of engines behind them, growing louder as the Empire's ships began their search. The sound of their pursuit was like a dark cloud looming over them, growing closer with each passing moment. As they reached the edge of the rocky plains, the dense trees of the forest came into view. The thick canopy would offer them cover, but it also meant they had to move faster, navigating through the tangled undergrowth and the shadows of the tall trees. "Almost there," Lyra said, her voice low but determined. Ethan's breath came in sharp gasps as he pushed forward. He could feel the weight of everything pressing down on him. The success of the mission, the explosion, was only temporary. It had bought them a few more hours, maybe a day, but it hadn't solved anything. The Empire would hunt them until the very end. When they finally reached the forest's edge, they ducked under the thick branches of the trees, moving deeper into the woods. The air was cooler here, filled with the smell of damp earth and pine. They paused for a moment to catch their breath, the sound of their rapid breathing echoing in the quiet forest. Ethan's mind was spinning. The mission had gone as well as it could have, better than expected, but now they were left with nothing, no allies, no way to contact anyone for help, and the Empire was relentless. He knew they couldn't stay here long. "We should keep moving," Lyra said, her eyes scanning the surroundings. "We can't stay in one place for too long. The Empire won't stop looking for us." Ethan nodded, but he didn't feel ready to move just yet. He looked at Lyra, his thoughts clouded. She had been so brave, so strong in their fight to escape. But now, after everything they had been through, he saw something in her eyes, a weariness, a doubt that hadn't been there before. "Lyra," he said quietly, his voice full of concern. "Are you okay?" Lyra hesitated, her hand brushing through her silver hair. Her gaze dropped to the ground, and for a moment, she looked more fragile than Ethan had ever seen her. "I don't know," she said softly. "I thought this would be easier. I thought if I just escaped, I would feel free. But now all I feel is fear. I don't know who I am anymore, Ethan. I was supposed to be their leader. I was supposed to save my people. But now I'm just running, and I don't know how much longer I can keep doing this." Ethan's heart ached for her. She wasn't just a prisoner of the Empire. She was a prisoner of her own guilt. The weight of leadership, of responsibility, had broken her down over the years. Now, even though she was free physically, she felt just as trapped in her own mind. "You don't have to do it alone," Ethan said gently, moving closer to her. "I'm here. I'll fight for you, and I won't stop until we're both safe." Lyra looked up at him, her eyes filled with gratitude. But there was still a sadness there, a sadness that seemed to be eating away at her, little by little. "I don't know if I can do it, Ethan," she whispered. "I don't know if I can keep going. I don't know if I can keep fighting." Ethan could see the struggle in her eyes, the pain, the fear of losing everything was written clearly on her face. It wasn't just about escaping anymore. It was about finding a way to live after everything had been taken from her. "We don't have to know everything right now," Ethan said, his voice steady and calm. "We just need to take it one step at a time. We'll figure it out together." For a long moment, Lyra didn't say anything. She simply looked at him, her expression softening. Finally, she gave a small nod, as if accepting his words, even if she didn't fully believe them yet. "You're right," she said quietly, "one step at a time." They stood there in silence for a few more moments, each of them lost in their own thoughts, the weight of their situation settling over them. Ethan knew that they couldn't keep running forever. The Empire would eventually catch up with them, no matter how far they ran. But for now, he was with Lyra, and that was all that mattered. "Let's keep moving," Ethan said finally, his voice resolute. We can't stay here. We'll find another way out. Lyra nodded, her resolve returning. She stepped forward, her steps more confident than before, though the uncertainty still lingered in her eyes. They walked deeper into the forest, knowing the road ahead would be long and dangerous, but determined to face it together. The days blurred together in a haze of constant movement. Ethan and Lyra had barely slept in the past few days, always on the run, always hiding. The Empire's ships were still searching for them, scanning every corner of the planet with their powerful sensors. But somehow, they had managed to evade capture, using the dense forests and the rocky terrain to their advantage. They had found a small abandoned cabin in the woods, hidden away from prying eyes. It wasn't much, just a rundown structure with creaky wooden walls and a leaky roof, but it was a place where they could rest for a while, gather their strength, and plan their next move. Ethan sat near the window, watching the rain fall gently outside. The world beyond the cabin was quiet now, the storm washing away the dust and dirt of their long journey. He felt the weight of exhaustion in his bones, but there was something else too, something he hadn't felt in a long time: peace. For the first time in days, he felt like he could breathe. He didn't have to keep running. For the moment, they were safe. Lyra, sitting on the small cot in the corner of the room, was still staring out the window. Her eyes, normally full of uncertainty and fear, were now softer, as if the quiet of the cabin had begun to settle into her soul. The journey had been long, and the road ahead was still uncertain, but for the first time in weeks, Ethan saw a flicker of hope in her eyes. "You're quiet," Ethan said, breaking the silence. "What's on your mind?" Lyra didn't immediately respond. She continued to look out the window, her eyes distant. Finally, after a long pause, she spoke. "I keep thinking about my people," she said softly. "I thought I was the one who could save them. I thought if I escaped, if I just got away, I could come back and lead them to freedom. But now I don't know if I can ever go back. I don't know if they'll even accept me. I've been gone too long." Ethan felt a pang of sympathy for her. He couldn't imagine the burden she carried, the weight of being a leader of a fallen people, torn between the duty to her people and the need for her own survival. He knew that the road ahead wasn't going to be easy for her. "You don't have to go back right away," Ethan said gently. "You don't have to have all the answers. What matters is that you're free now, and if you want to fight for your people, you can do it on your own terms, not because you feel like you have to." Lyra turned her head to look at him, her golden eyes reflecting the flickering candlelight. "I never thought I'd find someone like you, Ethan. Someone who believes in me, even when I don't believe in myself." Ethan felt a warmth in his chest at her words. He hadn't expected to form such a strong bond with her when he first decided to help her. But now, after everything they had been through, he couldn't imagine not standing by her side. "I'm here for you, Lyra," he said, his voice steady and sincere. "We'll figure this out together." Lyra smiled, a small, quiet smile that reached her eyes. It was the first time she had smiled in days, and it made Ethan feel like maybe, just maybe, they had a chance at something more than just survival. They sat in silence for a while, letting the rain wash over them, letting the peace of the moment sink in. Outside, the storm raged on, but inside the cabin, there was a calmness that felt almost surreal. Ethan had been a soldier his entire life, always moving, always fighting, always following orders. But this was different. This wasn't about orders. This wasn't about missions or duty. This was about something far more important: helping someone who had lost everything find a way forward. And in doing so, he had found something for himself too. After a while, Lyra stood up, stretching her tired limbs. "We can't stay here forever. The Empire will eventually find us, and we'll have to move on. But I think it's time we start thinking about the future. Not just surviving, but what comes next." Ethan stood as well, nodding in agreement. "We've been running for so long. It's time to start building something." Lyra's eyes gleamed with a renewed determination. "I've spent too long hiding. It's time for me to stop running. And if I'm going to make a difference, I need to start somewhere. I need to find a way to help my people." Ethan smiled at her, feeling a deep respect for the strength she had shown. Even when she didn't fully believe in herself, and I'll be with you every step of the way. We'll figure out what to do next, together. As they began packing their things and preparing to leave the cabin, there was a sense of purpose in the air. They didn't know what the future held, but they were ready to face it. They weren't just hiding anymore. They weren't just fighting to survive. They were fighting for something bigger, a chance for Lyra to reclaim her people's freedom, and a chance for them both to find peace in a galaxy that had forgotten them. The road ahead was still uncertain, and the Empire was never far behind. But Ethan and Lyra had made a choice. They would fight for their future, for each other, and for the possibility of something better. And as they stepped out into the rain, ready to begin their new journey, Ethan felt a spark of hope in his chest. They had no idea where the road would take them, but for the first time in a long while, it didn't matter. Together, they would face whatever came next.